There are many cases of strange disappearances in the world. Cases that seem to have no explanation, except one, that another dimension devours people at random. It may sound implausible, but when you hear the following cases, you will see that it is the only possible explanation. Number 7. First, we have Brian Schaeffer, a medical student in Ohio. In 2006, Brian went out with a group of friends to a bar. In the early hours of the morning, Brian separated for a moment from his friends to engage in conversation with two women who were there. Around 2 a.m., his friends took it for granted that Brian had gone home, since they didn't find him anywhere. They didn't attach much importance to the matter at the time. The worrisome thing was that, as the days went by, Brian still didn't show up. The local authorities were contacted and they demanded the recording of the bar's security cameras. When they checked the videotapes, they simply found nothing. Brian Schaeffer had entered the bar with friends, but never left. Investigating a murder or kidnapping, both possibilities were ruled out. Some claim that Brian somehow managed to travel to another dimension and that he is still trapped there. Number 6. The second case dates back to the 18th century. It was in Shepton Mallet, a small town in England. Owen Parfitt suffered from a kind of paralysis that prevented him from moving his legs and, therefore, walking, which is why he lived with his sister, who took care of him. Owen's sister had taken him to sit in an armchair at the entrance to his house, where the man used to spend the afternoons. Only this time, it was different. When his sister went to bring him in, as it was getting late, she only found the blanket with which Owen covered himself from the cold, but not a trace of him. At first, she thought a neighbor had helped Owen in, but after searching the entire house with no results, she became alarmed. Desperate, she searched house by house, asking the neighbors if anyone had seen him. Everyone said no. In addition, it would have been very strange to see him walking around on his own as, let us remember, Owen could not walk. What could have happened to him? Number 5. At 58, Thelma Pauline Melton was an overweight, hypertensive woman. It was 1981 and she was walking with two friends in the Great Smoky Mountains, a route she knew very well. She passed a few meters and turned around a curve. When her friends got there, there was no sign of Thelma. Due to her physical situation, it was impossible for the woman to have started running. Still, nothing more was ever heard of her. Number 4. In this spot, we will speak of the case of Martha Wright, considered one of the strangest and most surprising in the world. In 1975, she and her husband Jackson drove from New Jersey to New York. The weather was bad, so the windows of the car fogged up pretty badly and made it difficult to see. Upon entering a tunnel, it was impossible to continue driving, so it was necessary to stop to clean the windshield. Martha cleaned from the inside while Jackson took care of the outside. When the man cleaned a section of the glass and saw inside the vehicle, he found the passenger seat empty. He glanced inside the car, then into the tunnel. Martha had simply disappeared. There is a hypothesis that Jackson murdered his wife, but thinking about it, why would he make up such an unbelievable story to cover up the facts? Number 3. Brandon Swanson was a 19-year-old living in Minnesota. One night, he went out with his friends late. When he returned in his car to the town where he lived with his parents, he lost control and fell into a ditch. Brandon called his parents to pick him up, claiming he had just a few scratches. Brandon agreed with his parents that he would walk to the nearest town called Lind. When his parents got there, they didn't find Brandon. They continued along the road in search of their son, to the point where his car was supposed to be. There was nothing there either. They began to despair and called their son again, who replied that he was still walking. They were on the phone for 45 minutes. Then it was heard that Brandon said, "Oh shit," and then the call was cut off. The next day, Brandon's car was found stuck in a ditch, not where he said it was, but near another town called Taunton. One might suppose that Brandon gave the wrong address, but he was a native of the area. That hypothesis is quite implausible. His parents tried to constantly call his cell phone, which still had a tone but no answer. The emergency services said he might have fallen into a river, but this made no sense, as his cell phone would have shut down from the water damage. Number 2. Damian Mackenzie was a 10-year-old boy who, in 1974, was on a field trip to Victoria Falls with his classmates. During the walk, they realized that Damian was gone. Because the ground was swampy, they easily found his footprints and followed them. They reached a point where the tracks simply disappeared. No suspicious activity had been seen in the area, and the search dogs, curiously, failed to pick up the boy's scent. Damian simply vanished without a trace. Number 1. James E. Tedford boarded a bus from St. Albans to Bennington in 1949. 14 people saw James sitting on the bus at the next stop. Strangest of all, James was gone by the following stop, but his luggage was still there. Nothing made sense, as the bus had not stopped in between. But no doubt, the strangest part is that James's wife disappeared a few years earlier. Did James's wife travel to another dimension and then find a way to take her husband with her? Who knows? Zero Zone. Although Thomas Edison attributed the invention of cinema to himself, today we know that it was actually the work of Louis Le Prince. What allowed Edison to take credit was Louis's mysterious disappearance. The latter boarded a train to Paris in 1980, but the curious thing is that when Louis arrived at his destination, he never got off. A driver went to look for him in his cabin but found it empty. Louis and his luggage were gone. It was believed that Louis had gone out the window, but it was impossible, as these were completely sealed. The police still searched the entire stretch of railroad tracks without success. Some attribute Louis's disappearance to Thomas Edison, seeking to retain the success of the invention of cinema, but there is no evidence to prove it. It's amazing how many people disappear almost every day without a trace left behind. There are thousands of unclosed cases of this kind, in which even the best researchers never make progress. What if the dimensions are more interconnected than we think?